mentors, I want you to understand some of the complexities in relationships so that you're better able and equipped when you see them to know what to do. Let me tell you a story of one couple I know. They struggled for about 15 years in their marriage. And they were about to get a divorce. They had had it. They were just kind of living as roommates, and they recognized this is not working. And they kind of got to the point that they just said, well, we'll try anything. So they got a DVD series on marriage, and they sat home by themselves for a weekend, and they watched it. And they would pause it when something struck them, and they would say, do you feel that way? And they finally got to a point where they really listened to each other. And that DVD series helped them to think through and to talk about some of the impact on their relationship. And they recognized things that they both needed to change. And that was the tipping point in their marriage. And they did it all by themselves one weekend at home when they put down their defensiveness and really listened to each other. Okay, here's a pattern I see. Couples start out blaming and criticizing and attacking and then defending. And so there's a lot of defensiveness going around, and there's a lot of pointing the fingers back and forth. And then they'll withdraw. So if you can work with a couple to get past some of the poor communication behaviors, and that's all that's covered in our online class. But if you can get past those things, then they can start to get to some of the emotional triggers and some of the deeper and softer emotions, and then start to understand the impact on each other. And somehow it makes it a lot easier to be able to heal when you understand that you're hurting each other. So let me give an example from my marriage. This actually just happened. My wife and I were each given this bag of chocolates. So we each had a bag of chocolates, and I took them up to our bedroom because that's where we keep our chocolates. And I ate my chocolates before she ate hers. And I pulled out her bag and I grabbed a piece of chocolate, and she saw that and she was upset. She said, "What are you doing taking my chocolate?" And there was a time in my life where I would have been very dismissive, and I would have said, "What are you worried about? It's just a piece of chocolate. I don't know why you're so worked up." And I have recognized, though, I've gotten smarter about this. And when I do that, or when I used to do that, it would escalate, and then we would fight, or I would get analytical, and then she would withdraw, and she would end up withdrawing from me. And it's like, I know that that's not a good behavior. That escalation doesn't work. It doesn't build our relationship. What does is when I said, so tell me, help me understand why you're upset about this. She said, "You know what? I don't care about the chocolate. It's because you're not respecting me." And it's like, oh, it's about respect. It's like, well, I don't want my wife to feel disrespected. I love her. I want to build her up. I don't want to tear her down. And so, I changed my behavior, and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. It was wrong of me to do." And I apologized, and she accepted the apology. Okay. Now we have taken a lot of time and energy and work to be able to get to that point, to be able to do that quickly. But notice a pattern. I recognize the pattern of our behavior, that of what would lead, that if I would get dismissive, she would react, and she would stonewall. I knew that escalation would not lead to connection. So I recognized the pattern, and when I saw it coming, I was smart enough to say, okay, what's the deeper issue here? So I asked her, and she said, is it just about the chocolate, or is it something deeper? And she said, no, it's about respect. And so we were very quickly able to get to a solution and to get to something that was very easy for me to apologize. And then we felt more connected, and we felt connected again, and it wasn't a big deal. But it's taken a lot of work for us to be able to get there. So how can you, as mentors, help a couple through this process? Well, part of it is their motivation to change. Are they ready to change? Have they decided to change? So you can ask questions. It's like, well, what happens to your connection, if you get dismissive, or you argue, or does it impact your kids? Do your kids pick up on it? What is the impact to your relationship and to your bond? And so you can ask all these types of questions that can help them to look through, well, maybe I should change this and the pros and cons of changing. And then once a couple decides to change, you can then work on actions for how that change should go about and what that would look like, or when you recognize a pattern, what to do to stop it. So now, and understand, this is not about agreeing or disagreeing. I didn't agree to Michelle that I was showing disrespect to her by taking one of her chocolates. I just didn't see it as a big deal, but she did, and that was important. So it doesn't mean that you're agreeing. So let me give you some suggestions. One, when you see this happening, don't take sides. There's not necessarily a right or wrong. You know, whether or not you take someone's piece of chocolate isn't the issue. The issue is, are you respecting one another, loving one another, building one another up, or not? And that is all about perception and perceived actions. So don't take sides. Help the couple to understand the impact on one another. So stick to the impact and help to explore that, because that's what's important. And then remember, it's 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. Here's invariably what happens. As a couple, you'll talk to them, you'll talk to some of these behaviors, they'll start recognizing it, they'll come in, they'll have a really good week and they'll feel good about it. And then the next week they'll come in and they'll feel really poorly because they had a terrible week, and they'll think, oh my gosh, we can't get this done, and they get discouraged. And so we often use a phrase, remember, this is 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And you're going to make mistakes. That's just going to happen. You're going to fall into old patterns. That's okay. What you can do is, by learning by it and get better at recognizing the patterns and then repairing before it escalates into something harmful. So the 3 things that you can do is don't take sides, focus on what the impact is, and then just remind them it's 3 steps forward and 2 steps back.